Welcome to my show, When Everyone Wins, where a key goal I have for you is shifting from power over and under to power within and between. I'm your host, Judy Ryan. In each episode, I'll share my knowledge from decades in workplace culture transformation and leadership development as the founder and CEO of LifeWork Systems. I'll help you build trust and emotional and social intelligence. My show, When Everyone Wins, is about creating a life you love and helping others do the same. Well, hello, everybody. I am so excited to bring you another episode of When Everyone Wins. And I want to talk a little bit before I introduce my guest about our tagline, because my interview today is really going to be a reflection of what it means to put that tagline into motion. So it's about the way we use power. A lot of us are so conditioned to do power over and power under with one another, as opposed to a true shared power way of being with one another, where we draw upon that beautiful power from within that we can choose to use for purpose and to live from, purpose and values, and also that power that we can bring between people and for one another. And one of the things that um, we say in my work with LifeWork Systems, my company, is that awareness of things is the cupcakes in the party. They're easy, they're delicious, they're attractive, they go down easily. It's putting things into motion in our real lives that are the vegetables sometimes, where they're not as easy for us to want to move into. So when I think of shared power, I can't think of a better example than the guest that I'm inviting in today, which is on the topic of the gifts in shared power. And it's my guest today is Alyssa Hawn, who is not only a lifelong friend, but also a very experienced colleague who supports me in using her power and also lets me support her in using my power, as big as I could imagine. Alyssa is part of the Transformation Network. She is also a theta healer. She is also a person that specializes in human design and is just a woman with a heart of gold, like her mother, who is one of my very best friends. Alyssa is also one of my very best friends, and also has a brilliant mind that is constantly exploring and experimenting and has tremendous courage that allows her to bring a really loving and powerful intention to the world. And I think you'll be able to see that in this interview today. So welcome, Alyssa Hawn.
Oh, thank you, Judy. I loved that opening because I just felt my heart expand so big. I really value our friendship. I sometimes can't believe it's a real beautiful thing, but it's such a magical part of my life, and I know it's a magical part of yours too.
Yeah, it really is. And I would never have dreamed it. I mean, when I met you, Alyssa, you were about a year old and being toted in a wagon in front of my house, And, a lot of times, multi-generations, we tend to hold ourselves and each other in a box.
Yeah,
I think it's very common for people my age to hold younger people in a box of, well, I'm the wise one, and not really learn from each other. And I know when I was younger than you even, I wanted to feel that I could bring things to people of all ages. And a lot of times I felt like I wasn't being seen and heard. So I love it that in the safety and the trust that you and I have, that we are able to show ourselves to each other and to be curious about each other and to learn from each other. So tell me
totally.
what it's been like for you and what you do, and tell maybe the audience about what you do.
Yeah, so I want to start by saying I'm 36. So Judy and I, we have about 30 years between us. Right. So Judy says when she says she met me when I was 1 year old in a wagon, that's real. Uh, right. So my journey has been one where I was sort of living life on autopilot, right? Just doing what I would thought was the right thing to do. And then my world kind of came crashing down around me when I entered a health crisis. And from that point, I realized, like, I got curious, right? I was like, I can't just do the Western medical thing. I have to start asking questions. And what happened was I dove into this world of spirituality and healing that was so profound. And now I'm doing a lot of different kinds of work in the world to help people be the best versions of themselves. That's my mission. That actually Judy helped me identify my purpose, right? And that's my guidepost for how I live my life. But one of my biggest struggles, I think, has been because I'm young and because I don't have a lot of like long-term experience. I'm a wanderer, right? Like I've jumped from job to job to job. It's like, oh, are people going to take me seriously? Not only am I 36, I have a young face. A lot of people tell me I look like I'm in my 20s. I had one man recently ask me where I go to college. You know, and so I'm like, oh, are people going to take me less seriously because of my age and how I look? Right. But with you, Judy, I feel so powerful. I feel seen. And I feel like even though I'm young and maybe I know I don't have as much experience in life as you, that what I have to contribute is valuable and helpful. And
You
that's
know,
been really special.
I'm so glad you brought up this like idea of experience because I don't really believe that's where the deepest wisdom lies. I
Mm,
think the deepest wisdom lies in our heart and our willingness to be open to our intuition and to where we're guided to grow. I feel like I've become more in touch with my experience and my wisdom just in the last maybe 5 years, five or
mm,
10 years. And it's been because I've been on this path, but it's not because of the intellectual knowledge. It's more about really being willing to step into who I am. And so
mm.
I think I even had gifts when I was a small child. I know I did, and I think all of us do. But it's whether or not people are receptive to those gifts and curious about those gifts. And that's why I think for me it's a dream come true to create a relationship with you because it's a living proof of what I've always wanted for the world. I think our world is suffering because we don't share power. We don't have that level of let me learn from you and you learn from me in an easy um, I don't know, joyful way of operating. And
Right.
um, so I don't think it has to do with experience. The fact
Yeah.
that you have this wisdom, I think you came in with this wisdom.
Thank you. I think, and some of that wisdom isn't even mine. So, I mean, I'm the conduit for the wisdom. So one
Yeah,
of the things I do is I channel the creator or source or God. Um, and so we will, one thing that Judy and I do is sometimes I'll do theta healing on Judy, right? And wisdom will come in that doesn't even feel like it belongs to me, right?
yeah,
It's something that I'm learning as well in the process as we go through the
yeah.
theta healing experience together.
Yeah, and I feel the same way about my work. I remember when I was first invited to write articles, and I thought, I'm not a writer. And every time I would sit down to write, I would ask for something to come through, and it would. And I remember
Yeah.
one time it was like 11 o'clock at night, and nothing was coming through. And a friend called me at 11 o'clock at night, which is kind of weird anyway. And she said, well, what are you doing? And I said, I have an article due in an hour, and I have nothing coming through. And she goes, well, write about that. And I did. So
Yeah.
even then I was supported. And I also feel that way in my work. When I'm working with somebody, because I'm aligned with my work and I'm committed to helping people love their lives, it almost feels like something else takes over me. And I love that because it doesn't feel like I have to have a lot of effort to be able to guide someone or to be able to, which I do with you, which you let me do with you.
Yeah.
And so, anyway, I maybe we can talk a little bit more about the different ways that we do support each other after we come back from this first break.
Awesome.
Welcome back, everybody. I hope you are experiencing a life where you're winning, a life that you love, a life in which you can really fall back on that power within you that maybe was squashed down or punished or treated as suspect, because your power, when you guide and direct it, is what our world needs from you today. And so I'm so excited to have Alyssa Hawn here today to talk about how she has come into healing and health around her power and how she helps me with that. And also, one of the things I didn't mention when I talked about her background in theta healing and a producer on the Transformation Network, and I may have said this, but she's also been certified in the LifeWork Systems culture transformation process, which she applies in her personal life as well as her professional life. So, Alyssa,
Mhm.
would you like to talk about any of that?
Yes, I would. So, um, one thing I do to help people is I help them remove their limiting belief systems. So, beliefs that have held them back for a long time, like I'm not enough, or, like the best way to do conflict is through like argumentation, right? And blaming and shaming, right? Who knows what your belief systems are, right? And so, as I removed those belief systems from myself, I found myself with a lack of tools to actually like navigate conflict, right? So it's like, okay, I know this feels wrong, or I know that something's not right. I'm very attuned, but what do I do? Right? How do I do things differently? Right? I grew up with not I would say a great models of how to handle conflict in a healthy way. Not that all you do is conflict, Judy, but like that's that's a big thing I've gotten out of this is like when something feels wrong in my body or when I know something doesn't feel right, how do I respond? And
Right.
so I took the certification course with you because I wanted those tools, right? I
Oh,
I tell people in my theta healing sessions, right, we can do belief work all day, but if you're not taking action,
yeah.
right, you can't live a life that you truly love.
Yeah. It's those vegetables again, those darn
Right.
vegetables.
It's those vegetables. So, um, yeah, and so taking your course over 6 months really gave me the nutrition I needed to start to live my life in a way where I could navigate conflict in a way that was much more diplomatic, that was sensitive to my own needs and wants. Especially one thing as women, well, not maybe not all women, but a lot of women, right? We're more like, oh, well, what do you want? Right. And we dim down our own needs as
Yeah.
not important, and because that's what we've been taught, right?
Yes.
And so one thing I've learned through your course is how to really pay attention to, okay, what do I want,
Hmm. Hmm.
and
Yeah.
not sell myself short. Go.
Well, and it's hard to not sell ourselves short because we haven't been necessarily given not only the tools, but even the mindset to think about, one of the things you learned in the program was to ask, what am I feeling and what do I want? And a lot of people are
Mhm,
like, wait a minute, I'm not even used to asking that question to begin with. And even if you have that answer, how do you know how to proceed forward without having
mhm.
sufficient support? And support is more than a tool. Support is having the people with you that understand what you're struggling with or what you're working to overcome. It's also creating a lot of preliminary conditions that prevent people from having so much conflict. And that allows you to be in this space where you can come to somebody. So I love it when you call me and you say, I have this problem. I think it's this mistaken goal of misbehavior, but I'm not really sure how to do that redirect step. And I can walk you through that. That's the support that most of us are lacking, in addition
Totally.
to even having the tools and then having relationships where the trust is so high. Like I was thinking about you this morning, Alyssa. I don't think you and I have had less than a 10 relationship in months and months and months, maybe years. I don't even
Hmm.
remember a time where I haven't felt like it's been a 10. And in our world, when you have a 10, it just means we don't have anything unresolved that we haven't talked about. At least I think so.
Yeah,
Hopefully
yeah, yeah, right. It's all out on the table.
it's all out on the table.
Yeah.
And that is in itself a bit of a unique situation for most people. And there's always more to learn about that. I know you mentioned you're reading a book right now called Fight Right, which has
Hmm.
probably got some components of redirecting negative behavior or how to communicate effectively, some of the things you've learned. But it's like a ball to unwind the way we've been conditioned to fight or the way we've been conditioned to cope.
Yeah.
Most of us are stuck in our sympathetic nervous system where we're freaked out half the time
I
with
want
a
to
smile
say,
on our face.
yeah,
So
right. I want to say, Judy, I actually think our relationship is a 10 plus because not only is it, it's like everything's out, but it's like everything's out plus. Like the other day, I called Judy because I was feeling a lot of shame around something I did. And I'm going to share it because I just, maybe it will help somebody else out there, right? Like in my, I work in a healing center, right? And in the break room, somebody had a bottle of hemp oil and I was like, oh, I want to try that. Right. And it wasn't mine, but I took some, even though it wasn't mine. I didn't ask permission. And the guilt and shame I felt was so horrible. Right. And like, I was like, oh my God, they probably knew it. They're probably mad at me. I'm probably going to be hated. I'm probably going to be kicked out of the Bridge Healing Arts Center. Right. And I called you and I told you. And I don't think I could tell I don't think I'd feel comfortable telling my partner that even. Right?
Here you are now.
And now here I am, right? But you kind of like you helped me through it, right? And imagine if everybody had someone like that in their lives to help walk them through the shame, right? And
Yeah. Well, it's so interesting because shame is such a big topic. In our world, in LifeWork Systems, we call it inferiority feelings. Brene Brown calls it shame, but a lot of it is a misunderstanding about why we're even acting a certain way. So we're so hard on ourselves that we can't even explore what's behind it. And
yeah,
and like you said in the theta healing, because I was able then to share more shame with you about things that I haven't shared with a lot of people and felt that safety and also that understanding that sometimes it's what we have built up, like, you took this oil, you had unconscious reasons behind it that once you understood them, you're like, oh my God, that makes sense. I don't have
yeah,
to be so hard on myself. But it also created in you, for me, to be able to look at things in my history or things in my ancestry or things that are connected from the past. So I think most of us have a lot of things that we're so beating ourselves up for that they're actually here for us to learn from.
right.
And that would allow us all to heal and become more available to one another to love and support if we weren't so mired in hiding and shame. I feel different just from having a session with you yesterday about a big shame thing that I had felt. I'm not going to share it in public,
Okay,
but maybe one of these days I will. But the fact of it is, you helped me to really get at some root causes of it, and that's the important thing, is for us to be able to have people that can help understand not only the psychological but the spiritual reasons that we're doing some of these things.
totally.
You talked about thinking that the healing center was going to be against you, but
Yeah.
for me, and I think you probably also do this, it was my own beating up of myself, my own desire to abandon myself that is actually causing for me the greatest pain.
Yes, and that's actually something that I learned in my I took a Theta Healing instructor course last week, right? And we talked about psychic attacks. And
Mhm.
the psychic everybody's worried about other people sending them psychic attacks. Well, the worst psychic attacks are the ones you put on yourself.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And it's funny when you just said that about we're worried about it from the outside. It made me think about the word trust. People always say things like, well, I have to learn, I have to make sure I can trust this other person. When the reality is, it's not about trusting them, it's about trusting
Hmm.
yourself to know what to do, who to say yes to, who to say no to, how to handle a situation. That's much more important than whether they're trustworthy, but we've kind of got that backwards.
Yeah. When you've done everything at your best, that feels amazing. Right?
Yes.
Even if you're not getting the result that you wanted or hoped for, when you stand in integrity, it's a really beautiful thing. I love that story, Judy, and I'm going to butcher it, so maybe you could tell it. Of that woman who went to her boss and she was talking to her boss like what she wanted, and he belittled her. And I don't know, maybe you can share it because it's such a good
I'll share
story.
it. It's a great story. But what's important about it that you're really hitting on is that each thing we do is a separate transaction of our own. We call it in
Mhm.
LifeWork Systems staying in your own yard. So I'll tell this story because I think it's funny and it's so true.
Mhm.
This woman had been taught, she was a very timid, very really wanted harmony, didn't want to hurt people's feelings, didn't want to be hurt. And she had two officers in a company that she was reporting to. One of them had brought in the culture transformation and she just adored this person, had high trust, a 10 and everything. The other one was somebody that had not been through this, and he had a reputation for leading by intimidation. And he would he would set up meetings because she was a secretary. She would report to him about halftime. He would set up meetings with her. And then when she would go to the meetings, he wouldn't be there and he wouldn't have told her that he canceled the meetings. So she got freaked out because she was super conscientious. And so she learned this tool called the frustration tool, where you say a couple of things that are not easy initially. Like, I don't like it when you cancel meetings and you don't tell me. And because what I most desire, and this is really hard for most of us to say, because what I most desire is I most desire to feel confident about where I'm going and what I'm doing and feel stress free and feel relaxed and feel like I'm a good secretary. And I desire to have good teamwork with you and feel that you respect me. Those are hard things to say, but those are
Hmm.
the most important things to say. And then she asked for the behavior change. She said, so what I want is for you to text me or email me or call me if you're going to cancel a meeting. And then she asked for the commitment. Are you willing? All those things are difficult, even on a peer-to-peer relationship, much less a subordinate, whatever. I mean, I don't even believe in that subordinate thing, but in his mind, he believed in it. And she called me later and told me that when she did this tool, his reaction was to say, how dare you, lady? I pay your paycheck. You don't pay my paycheck. Who do you think you are? Of course, you can imagine this timid, loving, caring person who had practiced this tool and went and used it was kind of freaked out. But I asked her, I said, well, if you weren't worried about his reaction, his yard, his transaction, how did you feel about yourself? And she said, gosh, when I only think about that, I feel really proud of myself. I feel I was really brave and that I was really thoughtful. And I said, you were. And then she felt the peace and the fullness. I mean, she probably experienced some of that, but she felt greater fullness because she didn't get focused on what he was going to do with it. And she did tell me, just as a funny aside, she did tell me about 3 or 4 months later, she calls me up and she goes, he came over to my desk today and he said, what is this stuff you guys are doing over here? And she kind of played it, we're just doing this culture change stuff. And then he went into the other officer's office and said the same thing. And she said, he's never done this to me again. But more importantly, he's seeing other people leaving his office, his department, to work in this department because of the different levels of trust and healing and camaraderie in this other part of the company that was changing their culture. So it is really hard to get back to your point, Alyssa. It is really hard to look at the gifts we bring to ourselves and others when we have reactions from other people because we've been taught from little on that it's how other people feel about us that should be the most important, and it's
Right.
not.
Right. Right. There's something really amazing about being able to stand in your truth, whatever that is, even if you're afraid of how everybody's going to respond. Um, I wanted to share, I taught a class a couple years ago on boundaries, energetic boundaries,
Mhm.
right? And I actually used your tool in, I don't know if you know this, I used the frustration tool as an example. And I used as an example a real email that I sent to a man in my church who would come over and hug me, and I felt like my space was violated, but I was like I was taking it anyway because I'm like I don't want him to think I'm like rude. And I ended up writing him an email just saying, I don't like it when you hug and kiss me on the cheek. Um, and I used the tool, and I remember showing this email to this group of women, and they read it and they were like, oh, how did he respond? Right? Like how, oh my God, did he hate you? Because
Yeah.
I asked him to stop, and I asked him, what I wanted was, security in my boundaries. And
Mhm.
I wanted him to ask, right, before he touched me. And the result was really positive. He
Yeah.
wrote back saying, I'm so sorry. I had no idea.
Yeah.
And he didn't, we still remained on good terms,
Mhm.
right? He still, we don't hug anymore, but like,
Yeah.
it went back to kind of normal. Right.
Yeah.
And so I didn't have to feel that resentment anymore. But I say all this because I want people to know, like, at this point, I have used the frustration tool so many times, and almost every time the result is the really good. It's really positive,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?
I'm so glad you're saying that because it doesn't mean every time you use it, you're going to get, that kind of reaction but it's important to know that both can happen. And
Yeah,
in a sense that one is irrelevant to the other in a way. Um,
right. Yes.
and also, I love it that you had that reaction from those women and that you shared that because think of the women or men who aren't even aware of a tool like that. And then by sharing it, you kind of taught the room. And maybe you even went back and told them that this was the result. And then they realized, wait a minute, I'm not powerless. It's again that use of our power.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times, and this is not victim blaming, but I think a lot of times we are taken advantage of as men or women because we have not reclaimed our power that was often suppressed, controlled, dominated, and shamed. And it doesn't justify someone else's abuse of our power, but it is important for us to reclaim that power. I notice, even though you know about my lower back pain, I have this lower back pain thing that, by the way, is getting better today.
Oh,
But
good.
but it also made me aware of my core of my body is not as strong as it could be. And so I'm reclaiming that I'm going to make that a priority. Well, the same is true of having the core of our personal power, that we choose to reclaim it and we choose to educate it in ways that we were never taught to educate it because of the limitations of the time we were raised. You
Right.
know,
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's what's so special about both of our works is they really complement each other,
they
right?
do.
Looking to see, okay, where in our past where we taught wrong or where it maybe taught not to live our truth, right? And then you really provide the tools to allow people to live from that space of authenticity and power and truth.
Thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's time for us all to have a happy childhood because if we don't, we're going to continue down a path as humanity. And I don't mean to sound gloom and doom. I actually want to say this way. There's so much hope for our future if we stop hanging on to what we already know and
Mhm.
become willing to open to what we don't know.
Yeah.
And you are providing things that people often don't know, which I would love for you to talk about after we come back from this next break. I'd love for you to explain a little bit more about not only theta healing, but also human design and how that, because I see that complementing the psychology that you're learning through me is called individual psychology.
Yeah.
And human design is all about people understanding the individuality of people so that they don't treat everybody like a cookie cutter kind of response. And in that way, I think our work is also very complementary. So,
Yeah.
how do you feel about doing that? Maybe telling the audience a little bit about some of those correlations.
Yeah, that sounds great.
All
Cool.
right. So we'll do that after our break. Welcome back, everybody, to When Everyone Wins with Alyssa Hawn. I had asked during the break or before the break that Alyssa share a little bit more about the human design work that she does and the theta healing work she does. And Alyssa, I just ask you to kind of frame it in the context of how these tools help people have a deeper respect for their individuality so that they can come to, and the reclaiming of the deepest power within us, which is love.
Mhm.
If we really know ourselves as at the core, under all the fear and the conditioning, is this loving presence in the world, that the deeper we have a understanding of ourselves, the more that we can be available to be in service to ourselves, but also to the larger community. So,
Totally. Yeah, happy to share. And I think I'll start with human design. So Judy is also great at human design, by the way. You've taught yourself. I'm certified, but you've taught yourself a lot
and learned a
on
lot
your
from
own.
you.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's another way where we share power, right? But
Yes.
human design is the science of differentiation. It's the study of how we are all different. So using your birth information, your birthday, time, and location, you get a birth chart. And this chart is like a map, and it tells you how your energy is meant to function and operate in the world. It also gives clues to what your natural gifts and strengths are. It talks about how your intuition works and also where you might experience challenges or conditioning. So, what are the major themes of conditioning that you're here to overcome? So, some examples I see, like a lot of people are just designed to really care a lot. So they might overgive themselves, right? And burn out. That's one theme that I see really commonly, right? But there are many different examples. Right. So human design is this tool to help you gain greater understanding of yourself. And so you know the magic that is within you. And so I'll give an example. Um, so in human design, Judy and I both share this gift. It's called the channel of openness. And it's this ability to be open about your emotions, to share emotional knowledge in a public way. And so that often means through things like a podcast or a book, or you mentioned you write articles, Judy. I like to use this gift when writing emails to my email list, right? But basically, when I learned that I was here to share emotional truths in a public way, I was like, me? Like, I'm terrified of public speaking. And in fact, I had a lot of conditioning, and I was taught that as a woman, putting yourself out there was dangerous, right? To use your voice as a woman is scary, and it can often lead to things like death. And I know that sounds dramatic, right? But when I learned theta healing um, helped reveal my conditioning and where it comes from, so I understand why I had so much fear
Mhm.
around public speaking. So,
Mhm.
um, let's jump into. Do you want me to explain more about human design before I jump into theta healing?
Well, let me just comment on a few of the things
Mm-hmm.
you've already said,
Sure.
because it's well, first of all, the last thing you said is why I have so much fear. Theta healing helps with that. I would also say it's not only understanding why, but healing the root of it, which is
Hmm.
why in itself won't fix anything. Oh,
Yeah.
now I know why I do this, but I still knee jerk react. But also, one thing that I know this is, this is me showing the more woo-woo side of me because in my business, I don't necessarily talk about all of this. But what I loved about human design was that it was channeled in the mid 80s to
Hmm.
help parents initially to understand the evolving human and the evolving need to understand the unique individuality because of where humanity was evolving. I get chills just saying that.
Yeah.
But what was also interesting was I was introduced to the individual psychology of Alfred Adler in the mid 80s in a parenting context. So I believe that creation, universe, God, whatever you want to call it, has been conspiring to bring about evolution through the people like you and I that are willing to keep bringing that evolution forward with these various gifts that are provided to us. The other last thing I wanted to say is I've called you on occasion and said, God, why do I have to deep dive so much? And it kind of annoys people sometimes. And you're like, oh, you have gate so and so, and that gate is, and I'm like, oh, thank God, I'm not like crazy that I have this desire to deep dive. And it's just helped me to come to a lot of self-acceptance about who I am, whether
Right.
someone else is comfortable with it or not. And
Totally.
so
Oh,
anyway, so yeah, so go ahead. That
oh,
were just thoughts that were popping as you were talking.
yeah, I wanted to say my thought is in response to what you were saying is we've been so conditioned to be homogenized, right? Like
Mhm.
what the gate that you're talking about, I know you're talking about this gate of feelings, and it's this like innate desire and ability to go deep into the feelings of whatever it
Mhm.
is that you're
Mhm.
working on, right?
Yeah.
And not everybody has consistent access to that energy. So
Yes.
that's why it's helpful to know not only your design, but also other people's designs. So you know
Yeah.
what other people are good at and maybe where they aren't as comfortable. Right.
Right. So we
And
don't
it,
take it personally when they're not as comfortable.
right, right. And so, in my family, I have four sisters, right? And we all have these, what we call a defined throat, where we're able to communicate our feelings, our thoughts, like very easily. And then I have a sister who doesn't have a connection there.
Mhm.
And so we criticized her, like, why can't she just tell us how she's feeling? Like, whereas us, it's like, it's so easy, right? But for her, it doesn't feel natural. And so
Right.
once I learned that, I was like, oh. okay. So I think human design is really helpful for understanding self, but also having more acceptance about other people's
Yeah. Well,
experience.
I know, and just maybe because we're talking about sisters, one of my sisters is a pure manifester, and she doesn't have what's called a generator, which means she's not a go-getter the way that I am or you are. And my father was probably that kind of type, but he always kind of made her feel like she was somehow lazy and should be more like me.
Hmm.
She's not supposed to be. And
Yeah.
so even me being able to say that to her helped her because at times she probably felt like, well, darn Judy, she gets all the perks because, or all the props because she's such a go-getter, darn it, and she wasn't designed to be.
Right.
And she has other gifts. So I love that because it helps us to help other people to greater self-acceptance.
Yes. Yeah. It's a beautiful modality. I've done readings for families, relationships, right? And everybody just walks away feeling more empowered to be themselves, but also so much more understanding
Yeah,
of
yeah.
where everybody else is at. So
Well,
yeah, so the
before you jump into theta healing, because I want you to go there if you want to next, I
mhm,
also would like to invite you to talk about your vision that you shared with me of having a retreat, because you talked about I worked with a family, about having a retreat where you train people and you help people. So
mhm.
include that as well, because I think there's power in sharing an aligned vision like that.
Yeah, sure. Well, so I shared with Judy a vision that I had. Well, that wasn't about human, that was about theta healing,
That's what
actually.
I meant to say,
Oh,
theta.
okay.
Mhm.
Okay, how about I share that at the end?
Yes.
Yeah, so theta healing, for people who are curious, this is a meditation technique that was created by a woman named Diana Steibel in the 1990s. And she's still alive, she's still teaching. She's incredibly psychic, right? But she teaches people this technique which allows you to connect directly with source energy, or the creator of all that is what she calls this energy. Some people call this God or spirit or the universe, right? And from there you get information that comes in about the limiting beliefs and negative energies that are not serving the individual, so that then you can witness them being replaced with more empowering energies. And when I say you, I mean me, the practitioner.
Mhm.
So it's energy healing. I'm not actually doing the healing, I'm a witness and like almost like a translator of what is going on for the person I'm working with. um, and so that's what I do with Judy. But basically, it examines our belief systems that aren't serving us. And so we hold our belief systems on many different levels. A lot of people think, oh, I have this conscious mind, like, I this is what I think, this is who I am. But below that, we have the subconscious mind, which drives about 95% of our
Yeah.
actions, right? And we have no idea what's going on. So, for example, you might feel like, oh, I had a, I'll give an example. I had a session with a woman last week where the belief I got was, I'm consumed by grief all the time. And she's like, well, sometimes, not all the time, sometimes, not all the time, right? But I was like, no, it's it's there, right? And it's subconscious, because sometimes our subconscious mind, it's not available to us.
Mhm.
So we form our beliefs in different ways. We form our beliefs in childhood, right? And even older than that. But we
Mhm.
also have ancestral beliefs that we inherit. So if our
Mhm.
ancestors really suffered, we might suffer too in unconscious ways. So an
Mhm.
example of this, and this is well studied. There's a subject called epigenetics, which is for those who are interested. But, like, for example, descendants of Holocaust survivors are 6 times more likely to have anxiety, right? And this is
Yeah, which
what
is
the
in my family's
yes,
ancestry, and I've
yep,
had anxiety. Yeah.
right, right. And so it's not something that, and that makes sense. Another really good example is, oh, I think it was the Dutch famine, maybe, where the descendants of people from that famine were overweight and they had a really hard time losing weight. Well, they had the subconscious programming that, if they lost weight, they would die because their ancestors were in a famine,
Right, right. That
right?
makes so much sense. But it makes so much sense, but it's hard for us to believe that it came down through the DNA. You know,
Yes. But
And
now science is starting to show actually, yes, this is a
yeah,
real
science
thing.
is starting to show it. And that
Hmm.
takes it out of it just being this crazy woo-woo stuff or whatever. Alyssa, it reminds me of a couple of things real quick. My brother-in-law, he admittedly struggles with hoarding and OCD. And he was showing me his 23andMe profile, and he got to this one part that said, this is kind of funny, said that he's high, 48% higher than most people in his Neanderthal genetics. And one
Yeah.
of characteristics was holding on to things that you don't need.
Oh
I
my
just
God.
freaked us out. It
That
blew
makes so much sense for my partner, Andrew. He's like 98% more Neanderthal, and
us.
he's the worst in terms of hoarding.
Isn't that funny? It was just cracking us up. And
That's so
another
funny.
thing that hit me really hard a long time ago was there's a lot of I love human systems as you do, like things like Myers-Briggs
Mhm.
temperament systems, that sort of thing. And one of them is called the Enneagram, which is based on wounds and often that form us. And my one daughter, she is a type called the Challenger, which of course
Mhm.
she totally is and was. And she happened to be hearing it on the cassette tapes back in the day and said, "Oh my gosh, mom, that's me." And I was like, "No, SHIT, you know."
Yeah.
Started researching it, and it one of the books said that often a person with that characteristic in their that temperament was in utero when the mother lost a parent. And I
Mhm.
was pregnant with her when my mom died. And we
Yeah.
just kind of looked at each other like, wow. But that makes sense when you think about what crosses the genetic barriers, the birth barriers, the historical. To me, it makes more sense than not. And
Yeah,
yet
me
most
too.
people look at energy healing as kind of this woo-woo thing, but it really is probably more science-based than they even realize.
It is. It really is. And even it's funny, even like past lives. So another level in which we can hold beliefs is called the historical level, and these pertain to our past lives, but also the collective consciousness beliefs. So if everybody in your community thinks type 2 diabetes is irreversible, you are subconsciously you're going to think that as well. So it's interesting how much group consciousness affects our own
Yeah,
consciousness as well. Um,
yeah.
and then also old ancestral beliefs that are big, longer than 7 generations back. So say like 13 generations back, for example, that falls into the historical belief systems as well. So we can hold things on these belief systems um, really powerfully. And part of what I get to witness as a theta healer is even going back into people's past lives.
Well,
Um,
it's so interesting because I've always tried to tell people don't put so much stock in common sense because common sense may just be collective consciousness that is kind of like that saying,
Yeah,
God is love,
totally.
love is blind, Ray Charles is blind, Ray Charles is God. You know, it's
Yeah.
that's logic that
Duh.
we have. So common sense, we should at least at times be willing to question it. And
Mhm.
even if it was common at that time, like somebody holding extra weight because they were in a famine, it doesn't mean that we're to carry it forward. So,
Yeah.
so much of what we carry forward might have been appropriate at the time, but it isn't appropriate now, and we need to know how to let it go. So, somebody
Mhm.
coming to you, Alyssa, allows them to plumb these parts of themselves that are beyond their comprehension, which then frees them to live into the tools of the day because they're not hampered by these crazy like feelings that don't make sense to them or that can almost distract them.
Yes. Yeah, totally. So I mean back to the throat stuff, right? Um I had, I've lived lifetimes where I've in societies where they burned witches, right?
Yes.
Witches, right? And so what did I learn? I learned you can't use your voice or you're going to get killed or you're going to get called a witch or your people are going to hate you, right?
Well, yeah. And to even tie back to what's happening today is
Hmm.
it feels as if we're moving in, from what I've seen historically, we're moving into what's called a golden age, where women are supposed to be rising. And yet there's this old school fear of allowing them to rise. And that's why we see, at least in America, this push pull of democracy, fascism, women being honored and respected and heard, and women being suppressed. And it's because of so much of what has historically occurred. So
Yeah.
if we can understand that and work with it and heal it, That's why I love what you do. It's weird because even talking about it, I'm sure there will be people that'll say, well, that sounds a little woo-woo-ish, but if we can start to lean into understanding it and why it makes sense, I think it's easier for people to reach out to you and use these tools and these new ways of mindsets as well.
Right. Yeah. So what the other part about theta healing, it's not just looking at the limiting beliefs, it's replacing them with
Yes.
more empowering beliefs and using the power of the creator, right? And your own power, your free will, your power of choice to instill something that is helping you and helping humanity, right? And we have that power within us, but
Yeah.
so many people don't believe in that. And there are honestly, I've been doing this for 3 years and I've seen miracles happen. There are still times where I doubt myself and I doubt my power,
Oh,
right?
sure.
But there's so many layers in like
Mhm.
in our belief systems, our society, our unconscious. You can think of it as just like the biggest filing cabinet you've ever seen,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And
And you know what? I think one of the things you and I probably both would agree that we struggle with is when it seems like people don't agree with us or don't see it.
mhm,
Doesn't mean that it still isn't valid or that they won't recognize it down the road. I remember one time I learned something from somebody and I made fun of them and I talked bad about them at the time years ago.
yeah,
And then later I called up and apologized because I could finally understand what they were saying to me and why it made sense. So we don't even know when we doubt ourselves that it wasn't purposeful if we came at things from the right intention. And
right.
and so yeah.
One thing as an intuitive who spends a lot of time with other intuitives, right? We
Mhm.
might I've had the privilege of working next to another intuitive, right? And we can see the same thing, but it's kind of different,
Mhm.
right? Or sometimes it's really different,
Mhm.
right? Um, but it's like we are all looking at things from a different perspective, a different angle. It doesn't mean it's wrong,
Mhm.
right? It's just a different lens. And so, like, that's what I want everybody to know all the time when we criticize other people or put people down or judge, is they're seeing something from a completely different vantage point than you.
Right, right.
And
Well, I love that you said that because what you're really saying is why don't we put down the I'm right, you're wrong
mhm,
mentality? I know yesterday we did a theta healing, you and I, and you showed me a place where I had a limiting belief about deserving to love myself at a very deep level. And you replace that with it's easy to love myself. And I have felt so much relief just even thinking that thought now. Um, but I also realize I've been teaching for over 30 years to put down punishment. And yet, if I couldn't see that it was okay to stop punishing myself and to choose to love myself instead, I won't be able to model that. I can talk about it, but my energy is going to say otherwise.
right.
So I love that idea that not only are you helping people to recognize and give permission to let go of, but also replacing because that's what we really need is to be able to replace something. So now we can go out and live it even more fully. And
Yeah.
I'm just so astonished and grateful.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I am too. I am too. I think what we share together and like the work that we our separate works and how we combine them are super cool,
I
right? They
know.
they cover it on many different like the healing on many different fronts.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
If I had a wish for the people that are listening today, it would be that they ask themselves, God, the universe, it's all the same in my view. Help me receive the new. Help me open to the new way of looking at things, the new way of experiencing things, the new ways of being healed, the new ways of understanding, and to get curious. I think that's what is often lacking. I just watched the movie Conclave, and one of the sentences in there was the greatest harm to humanity was something like this is certainty.
mm,
We're
yeah,
we're an evolving system of growing in our awareness and our capability. And if we get certain about this is the way it is and it always will be, then we fall into change blindness. We,
totally.
we
It
can't.
makes me think about your human design, Judy. You have in human design we call it two an open mind center and an open crown, right? And the low expression, the low vibration of having an open mind, open crown is being certain.
Oh,
You are not designed to be certain about anything. You know, you're designed to see things from all kinds of different perspectives and lenses. And that's a gift that you have. That's a gift that 50% of the population has, actually.
love that. I love
Yeah.
that because I was raised in a family that was overly certain.
Yeah.
And now I can see the gift in that because it was sort of a subtle energy. Like my parents loved me deeply, but they would not allow me to have a viewpoint because they had to bring their certainty to me at all times. And I remember in my 20s going to a therapist and him and saying, "Why do I keep having this dream? I'm walking around my home of origin and I'm all alone." And he said, "Because intellectually and emotionally you are." And that is so subtle. It's not like my parents beat me or sexually abused me or any of that stuff. But many, many people are suffering from this same feeling of being abused by certainty. And so it has helped me to help people out of that trap of being defined by someone else's certainty and not
Yeah.
trusting their own knowingness.
Right.
So,
Right.
Alyssa, if I kind of said I would want people to know to open to not being so certain, even the
Mhm.
50% that want
Right.
to cling
Well,
to certainty.
right. Well, I think the truth is, like, we know nothing. Like, even somebody who's designed to have, not, I wouldn't say my high expression is having certainty, right? My highest expression is like knowing I'm connected to the creator, and that I'm inspired, like I have direct inspiration
Yes.
from this higher power. Um, but like I'm uncertain all the time, right? But I think with the open mind and the crown, like you, when people who have that energy try to be certain, it comes off as wrong. It comes off weird and it doesn't feel right to the other people around them.
No, no. And that's
Yeah.
why my freedom feels like it comes from being less concerned about being certain. I want to, I know we're at the end of our time. I just want to say to our listening public that the joy I have in having this 10 plus relationship with Alyssa is what I want you all to know is possible in all the relationships in your life. If you're willing to open to it, if you're willing to grow and heal, and that it allows you to have the gifts of shared power, which is what can fuel the beautiful transformation of our world into a safe and loving and caring and solution-oriented world where everyone wins because
Hmm.
we have now brought our power within and we're now using it for one another. And Alyssa, thank you for being, I feel choked up, the outward face of that.
Thank
Um,
you. You too. You too. Thank you, Judy.
Thank
And
you. You're welcome.
yeah, and thank you for having me.
You've been listening to When Everyone Wins, where we're shifting power over and under to power within and between. I'm Judy Ryan, your transformation talk radio host. Tune in each second and fourth Monday at 9 a.m. Pacific time to learn new concepts and tools and listen to conversations I have with thought leaders and change agents. You'll also see real-world applications of what I'm covering so that you experience the power of the concepts and tools I share. In each episode, I bring you my knowledge from decades in workplace culture transformation and leadership development as the founder and CEO of LifeWork Systems. I invite you to call in with your unique stories and questions. The path to ensure that everyone wins depends on our ability as people to create a life we love and help others do the same. For more information, visit lifeworksystems.com.